Okay, so this is Grammar Unit 1, Exercise 8. And so, as we talked about in class, the last two patterns are a part of this exercise. And so you've got pattern 9, where the transitive verb actually adds a descriptive attribute to the noun phrase. And so not every sentence that has a noun phrase to and an adjective is going to be pattern 9. It has to be the action of considering that gives the professor that label of intelligent. The way that the test was made gives it that label of easy, right? It's the painting that gives the hockey sticks the descriptor blue, okay? So considering the course, that's what makes it a challenge. That redefinition, right, is a result of the transitive verb, okay? And so if the transitive verb isn't adding that redefinition, then it's not an object complement. Okay, so when you look at the sentences, pattern 9 and 10, adjective, noun, same thing as 4 and 5, right? Subject to complement. It's just because the description is being applied to the direct object, that's why we have an object complement. And so that's the new kind of component that we have this week. And so just a reminder, the other thing that we talked about in class is we talked about in step 6, we hadn't really discussed the coordinating or correlative conjunctions yet. And so there's a whole list of those in the PowerPoint. And so, if it helps, you may want to kind of make yourself a little note that when you see an and, an or there's some correlative conjunctions, both and, neither nor, either or, et cetera, et cetera. So you may want to make a list there for you, for yourself. And the way we were labeling them, we had said was sort of with that asterisk. Okay, and so I'll show you that kind of in the first example. All right, so for exercise 8, sentence 1, the kids on our block and their dogs drive my mother crazy, okay? And so same basic process all the way until step 6. So in our process, we want to find our verb, right? And so in this case, it's an action. There's driving going on. And so once we look for our verb, we want to look for prepositional phrases. And so there's one preposition, on, right? It's on the wrong side of the verb, for it to be a part of the verb. And so in this case, our prepositional phrase is on our block. So really important, find and identify those prepositional phrases. If you wait until you do that at the end, then you may end up with noun phrases that you're kind of confusing you because really they just sort of belong in that circle, right? So on our block, could be where the driving is happening, or it could be which kids, right? And so remember, when you have adjective question and an adverb question that the prepositional phrase could answer, the adjective is going to win. So in this case, on our block tells us which kids, which makes it an adjective. Okay, so once we've taken care of our prepositional phrases, you can draw lines to the left and the right of your verb. So we're going to do that. So as the sentences get more complex, it's going to become increasingly more important that you kind of follow through the steps so that you don't get confused. So once we've drawn lines to separate the subject and predicate from the verb, then we want to go through and identify the form of all words and phrases in the sentence. So what I usually do at this point is I start scanning for the coordinating and correlative conjunctions, because what that means is I'm going to have 2 noun phrases or 2 adjectives or 2 adverbs or 2 prepositional phrases that I'm really going to be gluing together and treating as one thing. So if I go back to my sentence, I do have one coordinating conjunction, and that's the word and. So when I label these coordinating conjunctions, I'll generally use an asterisk. So computer science people, that's multiplication, right? If you want to think about it that way. So I'll use an asterisk, and then what I do is I look to the left and to the right of that coordinating conjunction to figure out which things in form are being glued together. Because the coordinating conjunction is always going to glue together 2 things that have the same form. So 2 noun phrases, 2 adjectives, 2 adverbs, et cetera, okay? And so what's really being glued together? To the right of this coordinating conjunction and, I have a noun phrase, they're dogs. To the left, I've also got a noun phrase. This one just happens to have a modifying element. It just happens to have that prepositional phrase glued to it. So that's going to end up being included in my kind of unit here. And so when I group things together, I'll draw a box around them, because visually what that shows me is that all of this mess, so this noun phrase, prepositional phrase, noun phrase, the whole thing together is really only going to count in my sentence in form as a single noun phrase. Okay, and so you don't label it noun phrase 1 and noun phrase 1. It's just noun phrase 1 all together, that unit. Okay, and it's a little weird. It looks a little messy, but humor me. It's going to make our lives easier when we get to our third grammar unit. All right, so then we have our verb. So we're going across the top row here. So to the right of our verb, we have my mother. Right? That noun phrase, my mother, is different than the kids and different than the dogs, and so that makes us have a noun phrase 2 here. Okay, so you want to make sure that if you have something else in your sentence, crazy or like an adverb or something like that, that you separate it out. So do it with a dotted line, do it with a solid line, however you do that. Don't leave that thing kind of unidentified in its form and function. So crazy is an adjective. And I know that because if I put it in my little test sentence, the crazy person is crazy, right? The blank person is blank. It works. Okay, I could also look it up in the dictionary, and I could see in the dictionary crazy is an adjective in its form. So then what I want to figure out along that bottom row is what's the function of everything in my sentence. Okay, and so function-wise, when I have a noun phrase 2, that helps me to know that I have a transitive verb. Okay, and that simplifies considerably in my sentence patterns. I know I'm either going to be looking at 7, 8, 9, or 10. Okay, so the adjective sentence number 9 with the object complement, what I want to ask myself is, if this is going to be pattern 9, is the verb giving the descriptive label to my direct object? Okay, and so in this sentence, the action of driving is giving this descriptive label of crazy to the mother, right? Without that little action, mom's not crazy, okay? And so in this case, this is going to be pattern 9. And so that means along my bottom row, I need a subject, right, who's doing the action. And so this whole thing is our kind of compound subject here. So driving is my transitive verb, and then my mother is the direct object, right? Who or what is driven. And then crazy is the object complement, right? Don't label it subject complement, because crazy doesn't describe the kids and their dogs, right? It describes the mother, the direct object, okay? So it completes our understanding. All right, so sentence 2, she calls them a menace to the neighborhood. So in this sentence, we're going to find our verb, right? So the verb looks like calls. And so then when we look for our prepositional phrases or our prepositions, to is a preposition, right? You have 2 whole noun phrases, them and a menace. And so those 2 noun phrases are in between your verb and your preposition. So you don't have to worry about it being kind of a particle or a phrasal verb. To the neighborhood, that prepositional phrase, you want to be careful with to, remember, because 4 and 2, you always want to check to make sure that they're not your indirect objects, right? And so, is the calling them, is that something being given to the neighborhood, right? And something being done on behalf of the neighborhood. So we want to be careful with that one when we get to the bottom row. We've taken care of our prepositional phrase though, and so we can draw our lines. So to the left of our verb, she, that single little pronoun, we're still going to label it noun phrase 1. Them, right, different than she. It's a third person plural pronoun rather than a third person singular there. So we label that noun phrase 2. And then we have menace. So this is a little troublesome because we have to sort of decide, are we labeling this noun phrase 3, right? So is them going to receive the menace? One's the indirect object, one's the direct object. Or is menace redefining them, right, because of this action? And what we really want here is a redefinition, okay? And so whether you label it NP2 or NP3, you may have to kind of jump ahead a step and say, is this 8, right, with an indirect object, or is it 10 with a direct object? So you may have to do a little bit of double checking when you have noun phrase kind of after your verb. So what we have here is a redefinition, which means this prepositional phrase is not going to be an indirect object, because you're not going to have a direct object and an object complement and an indirect object. Okay, that you're not going to have mixtures of two different patterns. They're going to be unique. So then when we go through and we look at the bottom row here, we know we have a transitive verb because we have a noun phrase 2. We know we have a subject, right, who's doing the calling. That's she. them, right, who or what is called, that's our direct object. And then a menace, or the redefinition of them, is going to be our object complement. This is weird because a menace looks like it's singular and them is plural, and that's okay, right? Because you can label a group of people a singular thing. I know that seems a little weird, but it can kind of work that way, okay? So, and then to the neighborhood, in terms of how it's functioning, right? What kind of menace? Okay, so that's going to make it an adjective. They're not a menace to the universe, they're just a menace to the neighborhood. Sometimes that can help with the adjective, asking yourself if, are there different kinds of menaces, right? And we're specifying it's this kind of menace. Sometimes that may help you figure out that this is an adjective prepositional phrase here. Okay, so we've taken care of the form of everything, we took care of the function of everything, and so pattern-wise with the noun phrase, object complement, this is pattern 10. Okay, so in class we're going to take a look at 3 and 4, and then 5 through 8 will be independent practice.